So today, it's our first birthday. This is the 12th. This is the year's birthday celebration. So everybody celebrate. Let's do a big clap in the window. Woo! Party faces. And today, to celebrate, we've got 3 talks. So if you've not been to a Creative Mornings talk before, what usually happens, we have one main speaker who delivers a talk on the topic for kind of 20, 30 minutes, and then there's a Q&A. Today we've got 3. We've got 3 special speakers, and you can see them on your screen. We're going to kick off with Mr. Richard Hyde. We're going to then have a Carla sandwich with Carla in the middle, who's the first talk ever on our first birthday. And then Mr. Adam Buss, not accompanied by his wife, who's in that photo, I believe. So it's amazing, right? I can't believe a year's gone by already. I know a few of you have been here since the kind of beginning. I think Selena was kind of towards the start, and obviously the Future Proof guys who have been with us from the beginning, and Adam, who represents Quad and Mainframe in this call, will be there from the beginning. It's been brilliant. It's been a brilliant part of the Derby community, and it's been a real pleasure to meet you all, because I hope we've got people still coming in. It's been a real pleasure, and we do it for you, right? It's literally just me and the Future Proof guys filming me if you guys don't come. So it's super important, and it's super pleasing that you guys turn up for us every week and come into the marvelous venue that is Quad. We come to the talks bit. So every month, like I say, we've got a global theme, and this month's global theme is purpose, and it's made by and chosen by the guys at Creative Mornings Indianapolis, by a guy called Jason Ratliff. And it's such a great talk. It's such a great topic, and it means so much to so many different people. And today we've got 3 speakers sharing their thoughts for 10 minutes on it. And we're going to kick off in a second when I stop sharing screen with Mr. Richard Hyde. So Mr. Richard Hyde, if you prepare yourself, I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a second. Hopefully that works. Are we back? Can we see stuff? Richard Hyde, if you want to kick off with a brief introduction into who you are, and then go into your talk, mate, that'd be awesome.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. Let's see how that goes. So yeah, I've been to a number of the events in Derby. I live between Nottingham and Derby. This talk on purpose is really going to take a kind of a look at my own career in the digital world, and how that my purpose has evolved over my working life, which was a really interesting opportunity. I mean, it's a great word, isn't it? Purpose. It means a lot of things. It's a very personal topic as well. So just wait a sec while this boots up. There we go. Can everyone see that okay? Is that all right, Tim?
We're all good, I think.
Excellent. So yeah, I'm Richard Hyde, as I said. I've had a varied career in the creative world, which has sort of been split into 3 different phases. As I looked at my own sort of purpose over 30 years, effectively, it's split down into these sort of 3 areas. So, I started out as a fairly disillusioned teenager, not really knowing what I wanted to do. Graduated at the height of Mrs. Thatcher's fame, so that didn't go so well. And then spent a little bit of time in the wilderness before I got a lucky break and sort of retrained, got a PhD, started a couple of businesses, which went pretty well. A little bit of disillusionment towards the end of that, which we'll come to later. And in my kind of more recent history, I've gone back to fine art. So the 3 different phases as I looked back at my own purpose. And I thought what would be interesting would be to kind of try and investigate how my purpose had kind of evolved over those 3 different stages. So that's what we're going to look at over the next few minutes. I'm not ashamed of showing a few pictures of myself in my teenage years. This is me as a teenager before university. Yes, I was a bit of a punk rocker, but also I was absolute passionate about the environment at the same time. So behind me, you can't really see, but behind me, I had a map of our local area where I lived up in Yorkshire. And I used to note all the creatures that I spotted in my local environment and make little flags and stick them in this map. And they all used to fall out on the floor. So, you know, I was passionate about nature, about the creative aspect of nature, but also I was a very keen photographer. And at that point in your career, you know, when you're at university, you know, your world is very small, you know, you don't see that far. So in terms of purpose, you know, I just wanted to be in the in crowd. I just wanted to find a pathway in the world, because really that's as far as my reach spread. So it was very, very kind of minimal. But as I mentioned at the start, I then, you know, had a few dead-end jobs, got a lucky break while I was working at Nottingham University, got a PhD, and then left to form a couple of businesses, which when things really started to move a lot faster, we set up a couple of businesses developing digital learning for, you know, blue chip organizations around the globe, really. And it went really well. And this was my world, as you can see here. You know, Tim mentioned project management at the start with Basecamp. Yeah, we used to use Basecamp. I became a pretty full-on project manager. So the creative kind of streak that I had as a youngster was pretty much dumbed out of me, as I had to adhere to tasks, deadlines, budgets. So, you know, we were really successful, but I think my purpose here changed, and I almost had two purposes. There was a purpose which was very business focused on delivering the best for the customer within their budget. But in the back of my head, I was always trying to innovate, trying to kind of inject creativity into the business to keep us fresh, to keep us on the cutting edge of what we were doing. And these really competed with each other, which did become personally quite frustrating for me. But also, you know, when I was fighting with my partner, who was more financially organized, it did create a few challenges. So the way I responded to that was really to become, I guess, a bit of a polymath, you know, wear different hats. We're in a, you know, in the early 2000s, we were in a really quite fast moving digital industry. So we were having to cater for mobile design, for, you know, social media, which was just starting. So we needed communication skills. We had to understand marketing, because a lot of the learning solutions that we were delivering were kind of working in parallel with a marketing campaign. So there were many different skills to learn, which was great. But, you know, a lot of R&D in these newer areas was risky. So, you know, you were risking profit on the other side of the business. So again, these two challenges of trying to remain creative but trying to remain profitable were competing purposes. But it worked. You know, we've stayed ahead of the game, but it did come to a head. So I'm not sure if any of you recognize the film here. You probably do if you from my sort of generation. This is a film called With Nell and I. And, you know, there's a scene in the film where it's approaching the end of the 1960s, and hippies are now becoming, you know, pretty mainstream. There's a hippie in the film, Danny, who says this quote here, you know, hippies are so uncool now that they're selling hippie wigs in Woolworths. And in some sense, that's what happened in our industry. You know, e-learning became very profitable, and the learning aspect, as in the quality of what we were delivering, was almost becoming more commoditized. You know, it was less about the actual product; it was all about the price point, which became, you know, that's, I guess, when the, you know, disillusionment set in my head. You know, what I offered to the business was being sort of taken out of the equation. So I sold the business with a colleague, and I got out and went back to something completely different. Oops, sorry, let me just go back a couple. My iPad's a bit Heath Robinson. There we go. So this is my world now. it was interesting because, you know, as a creative organization, we used to tour around the local degree shows, you know, scouting for graphic design talent. But in one of the later years, I actually was looking around and thought, actually, this course looks really good. So I actually enrolled on an Access course in Nottingham and absolutely loved it. And this is one of my projects. You know, unhinged creativity was really what I've been missing in my business life. And it was fantastic. So I did an Access course. I had a vision of really taking that back into business. So going back into business all energized with a new kind of creative zest, but they convinced me to stay on and do the fine art degree, which I'm now doing. So it's really kind of changed the way I'm thinking. So in terms of a purpose now, this diagram here really kind of epitomizes the new way I work. So in terms of a purpose now, it's getting to grips with this. You know, I've come from a very linear, very focused project management process, which is nothing like this. I mean, the fascination with this process is that, you know, the outcome may or may not happen. You know, you may dive back in to re-question what you're doing. And it's been really challenging. Of everything that I've done in the last couple of years, getting to grips with this as a new process has been my absolute focus, to kind of break down my old habits, my old way of working. So purpose-wise, this is where I am now. And it's fantastic. You know, I'm really enjoying it. As a sideline, I thought it'd be really interesting to investigate how other creative people work, you know, what their routines are. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with this website, but it's called The Daily Routines of Famous Creative People. There's actually a book as well, which I've got here. And it's really fascinating to look at in terms of how people spend their days, particularly where creative work happens, you know, mostly in the mornings, as you can see here. So we've got people like Charles Darwin, we've got Mozart. Interestingly, Mozart took an hour to get dressed in the morning, which I quite like. But the interesting thing for me on this is how little admin people actually do. They really seem to outsource that as, you know, almost like dumping the dross. And again, that's, in terms of purpose, I've taken that on board as well. You know, trying to kind of rid your day of the basic mundane stuff to remain in that creative space is really important. So that's what I've taken forward as well. So check that site out. So before we finish, this quote I really like. A lot of people think it was Joseph McCarthy that said this in the 50s, but actually it goes way back to King Leopold of Belgium, who said it in a letter to Queen Victoria in 1845. And I love the way that he saw the artist as being quite subversive. So from my own perspective, I guess this is the final icing on the cake in terms of my new purpose, is being able to touch different people at all levels of society. I think in my previous world, you know, my business, you know, we were touching a thin layer of society, but now, you know, with new creative freedom, I can touch, you know, a lot more of society, not in a subversive way, but hopefully just to try and, you know, show them what I do and give them exposure to the natural world and hopefully help them navigate it in a creative way. So looking back at those three phases that I mentioned at the start, I tried to kind of summarize, you know, what were the common elements, and looking at purpose and how it's evolved. Your own purpose is really only as big as you are. That's my kind of summary. You know, your own vision of what you are and what you want to be is only within your own, you know, geographical range. So if you want to grow your purpose, I guess what you need to do is grow your own world, be that through networking opportunities like this, by improving your skills, or some other mechanism. But, you know, don't limit yourselves and think you can't achieve great things, because, you know, it's all out there to be had. I hope that's been really interesting, because it's been an interesting process looking at my own purpose. But you know, I hope there's something there that you can take away from it. Thank you. I will stop there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. You want to stop sharing your screen? We can see everybody if they stick their hands up for questions. I thought that was, I mean, a good page full of notes, like from the fact that I agree with you. I'm one of those creative people that wear a lot of different hats, and it reminded me of a quote that goes something like, it doesn't matter how you get there, it doesn't if you know where you're going. Like, you can wear loads of different hats, you can try loads of different things if you have a purpose that drives you in the right way. And I love the phrase unhinged creativity. I'm stealing that unabashedly. I thought it was awesome. And of course the other bonds of that creative famous people site looks wicked. I might lose some hours.
Book. Great book.
Is it? Awesome. And your I'll book that. I'll get that. And your purpose is as big as you are as well. It's great. If anybody's got any questions, stick your hand up for Richard. A couple of questions or comments or anything. I've got 2 screens, so you have to go with me. Just stick your hands up anywhere. Anyone? If you want to unmute and stand up. Are we good? Okay. Oh, Sharon, have you got a question? Did you stick your hand up? Go, unmute yourself. Pop in.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi. Sorry, I don't really have a specific question. I just wanted to say I really enjoyed that, and Mozart getting dressed in an hour. I often say I don't understand how these people get dressed in the morning, and now I understand that it's all about creativity. So that's brilliant. I really enjoyed that, and it's nice to see so many people as well. So, hi. That was it.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's really good. Any final questions before we move on to Miss Carla Dee? Anyone? I'm squinting through screens. Okay, cool. Carla, are you ready? Unmute yourself.
I'm ready.
Excellent.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, I'm going to mute myself. So if you give yourself an intro and then get on with your first ever talk.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm Carla. I'm a smiler, daydreamer, and doodler. My talk is not PowerPoint. I'm going old school. We're going props. We're going sketchbook, because that's how I roll. So first of all, I want to know, does everyone know this guy? This is Emmett. He's a bit of a hero of mine. I love Lego. I still love Lego. This guy is just an ordinary construction worker who discovers he's been chosen by the Lego world to save the Lego world by prophecy. Emmett was always messing things up, so the other master builders were getting quite annoyed with him. They weren't impressed. But then he realises that it's not about following instructions. It's about using your imagination and your creativity, and that's when he finds his purpose and saves the Lego world. Hurrah! And this is a quote from the Lego movie by the wizard. And the wizard speaks to Emmett and tells him this: the only thing anyone needs to be special is to believe that you can be. I know it sounds like a cat poster, but it's true. So I believe everyone has that special, unique power, just like Emmett, with an important mission in life. The world is a bit crazy right now, so it's time to think about what lights you up and to find your own purpose and to find your power. I'm a 70s baby whose favourite things were smiling, daydreaming, and making a mess. I love drawing, sticking, cutting, painting. I'd sleep with my colouring book and my colouring pencils under my pillow, just in case I woke up with a new idea. And I loved making cards. I still love making cards. Seeing my family open the cards, this was and still is the best thing ever. Even though I got a GCSE grade E in art. I still went to art college. And after that, I went to uni, and that's when I came to Derby. And I've just fell in love with the place. So after my degree, I've stayed and I've made it my home. So fast forward a good few decades, and I climbed the corporate ladder and ended up in management. But I really miss being creative. So I went back to doing what I loved, which is design. But deep down, that wasn't enough. So one night on maternity leave, I was all alone in the living room. My husband was training for a marathon. The kids were tucked up in bed, and it was just me in the dark. It was all quiet, and there was just the glow of the computer screen, and I'd locked myself out my email account. And the security question was, what is your dream job? And the answer is greetings card designer. And then it hit me like a bolt of lightning. I wasn't following my dream. But this is when the hard work really started, because I was a mum of 2, juggling things, looking after a house, looking after my husband, because let's face it, sometimes that's like an extra kid at times. I went back to work part-time, and to top it all off, I had this scratch that I had to itch. And I just wanted to start making art that I've always wanted to do. But I kind of wish I'd done it sooner, before all this like responsibility and mum gig and everything, when I had all that free time. So the first thing I realised, I was very rusty. At work, as a designer, I follow a brief. But now the brief was blown wide open. So I needed inspiration. And I needed to practice. That was when I stumbled across this thing called Instagram, and it was a revelation. And I was a bit late to the party, actually. Instagrams have been going on a while, but I found lots of artists and communities and people that were already doing what I wanted to do, but better. So what did I do? I spent a whole year making oodles of doodles. I had some happy vibes and some sparkle, what I like to call la la love. So I was making greetings cards for every single person I knew, because I could never find the perfect one in the card shops anyway, until I felt ready to show my work for the first time at a local craft fair. But of course I wasn't ready at all, and I was totally out of my comfort zone. I was putting myself out there. It was a brave move. I just kept thinking to myself, what if nobody likes it? What if this is just a total waste of time? But even before the doors opened, a lady came up and saw my stuff, and she bought 10 cards off me. Even before the doors had opened, I couldn't believe it. I was in total shock. I was thinking, oh my God, she likes what I'm doing, and she's even willing to pay for it. This is amazing. So after that, I set up an online shop. I clearly remember my first online sale. I was actually in Birmingham for my kid's birthday. We were staying in a Premier Inn. My kids love Premier Inn, but there are other hotel chains available. And when I got the sale, you know, it goes ka-ching. We all did a happy dance around the hotel room. It was a bit like the conga. And then basically I cut the trip short, because I'm thinking I need to post this order out. It was a big order. So I cut the trip short. Went home. I packed it all up lovingly and everything. And then I skipped to the post office with the biggest smile on my face. And it was a bit like, hurrah! And still now, each sale gives me the tingles. It means people believe in me. It spurs me on. And I make more stuff to make people happy. So, but what I realised was that eureka moment, it wasn't just about following my dream. It was about finding my true self. I found this thing that made me really excited again. I had no idea where I was going with it. I've got no plan, but I just wanted to find out. And I started to think differently, and I started to dress differently. I got rid of all my dark clothes and I gave them to charity. And then I started dressing how I wanted to reflect my personality. I started dyeing my hair pink. I'm 40 years old. I started to dye my hair pink. I went to art college. Everyone had crazy coloured hair apart from me. So I think my husband thinks I'm having a midlife crisis right now. And I don't know, maybe I am. So I started finding inspiration everywhere I went. I love street art, the food that I eat, the songs that I dance to in the kitchen. But my favourite material is listening to people and the funny things that they say. So I always make sure I have a notebook or my phone or a scrap piece of paper, and I jot it down, you know, just in case that fun idea, you know, turns into something. And I started to take more of an interest in the world, you know, like reading books, going to exhibitions. I'd enjoyed meeting and chatting to other people and listening to their journeys. I wanted to be like them. But most of all, it opened me up to a lot of new things, new experiences, like joining the Happy Cafe, big up to Yvonne. Other things like meeting new people, like you lovely lot. I'm just getting more opportunities. So I entered a competition as one of the artists for the Derby Ram Trail, and I've been selected, so that's amazing. Doing this scary talk that I would never ever do normally. So thank you, Tim and the team, for asking me. This is, I know I'm going to feel good after this. So finding your purpose will open so many doors. It will fill you up with all the good feels, and it will lead you down your own unique path. Realistically, right now, I have no time for anything. I have constant mum guilt. Sometimes I miss important birthdays, special occasions because of deadlines of work or craft fairs. Kind of Christmas is normally cancelled now because I'm just so busy. But, you know, I don't get to celebrate Christmas until Christmas Eve when everything stops. And even my mum says, Carla, you've got too much on, you should slow down. But the problem is I can't. I can't until I've exhausted all these possibilities, because this is my purpose. So for me, success is not about making money. It's about making a difference in people's lives. And in return, that makes a positive difference in my life. And I hope that I've done that today. So here's Lego me. And I'm here to tell you that it's never too late to find your purpose. And I promise if you find it, it will bring you so much happiness. It's inside all of us, because everyone is awesome. So just before I go, there's your unique path if you'd like to follow it. What I'd like you all to do is text 3 friends, and I'd like you to ask them what they love about you. Because when they text back, these are going to be your strengths. This is your power, and maybe the start of your path. And thank you all for listening.
Woo! Nice one, Carla. Well done. That was wicked. That was really good. That was really good. I love that. I love a great start, because Lego is cool. Full stop.
That's why we will be friends.
And to have your own Lego character, I am definitely doing that. I suppose I just have to take the hair off anybody, and it's fine.
Oh, wait a minute. We'll just take Emmett's hair off. There you go.
Yes, I've got my own Lego character.
No.
But there's some really good stuff in there. Like, inspiration is everywhere. Asking the question, what is your dream job? That's a good question to ask, because I'm still not sure I know, if I'm honest, and I'm 42.
The thing is, though, I set those questions up years ago.
Yeah.
I set that question up sort of in my teens. Yeah, I kind of, it was a bit like a Back to the Future moment.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, it was very, very surreal. It was exactly like I'd just been hit by something, and it was that light bulb moment.
Good. Oh, good. Well, we're glad you had it, because you're really cool, and it's great to have you in our community. So, does anybody else stick your hands up or put them in the chat if anyone's got any questions? Rob Dawes, do you want to unmute, mate?
Yeah. Firstly, here's my Emmett.
Hey.
You mentioned being busy, especially around those seasons like Christmas.
Yeah.
Does that impinge on the creativity that you had to itch, or is it just a case of because you love it so much, you just take that as part of it?
You know what? Christmas before was my favourite time of year. My birthday's on the 21st of December. I used to party from the 1st of December to, the end of December, because I loved Christmas. Christmas is a little bit ruined, but you're right, Rob, because I love it so much, it doesn't bother me so much, because I kind of know that what I'm doing is going to make other people happy. I'm doing special gifts for people. It doesn't feel like a sacrifice. I'm doing what I love. I try and cut off on my birthday. So I know I say I work until Christmas Eve. I try and do it on the 21st. But my birthday last year was a bit rubbish because I was so tired. I kind of fell asleep really early. I had a takeaway, watched a movie, fell asleep halfway through. So yes, it's bad because I have to say no to a lot of things over Christmas. I can't go to like works dues or people, things that are happening around there. So yeah, but no, I have this thing that I have to do. It sounds bad. It kind of takes over everything.
Cool. Anybody else got any questions before we move on to the final talk? Anybody? Shouting up. I'm trying to scroll past all the screens because of all the people.
Oh, I'd like to share something.
Oh, go on, Steve. Steve Whittle.
I heard what you said about texting people then, and so I just thought I'd try it quickly. I've got a small group of pals of mine on a group, so I quickly said I've just been challenged, and I'd like to know what you guys think of me. I've had 3 answers this morning.
Can you share them?
One person said, "I don't know who you are, stop texting me." One was, "You're a knob," and the other one was, "I like you because whenever we go to parties together, you're much more likely to embarrass yourself than me."
Oh,
So I take the pressure off, apparently. So it hasn't been a complete success for me so far.
No, I think the last one is definitely that used to be me. Yeah, definitely. Break dancing on the floor when everyone else is standing upright. Yeah. No. Brilliant.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Carl. Another round of applause.
Can I just want to say that if your thing is, it's Jen. Can you see me?
Hi, Jen.
Hi, Jen. Sorry, yeah.
2 things. One, you're amazing, Carla. Thank you. I was almost in tears in that. It was wonderful.
Oh, it was a bit soul searching for me. I did have a bit. I did, because I'm quite an emotional person. I did have a few tears at the time, thinking, I'm digging deep now here. I'm digging deep.
Yeah, no, it was really good. And then, secondly, Steve, if one of your things is embarrassing yourself, I think that's a good thing for an entrepreneur, because you always make mistakes, or that's a lot of what it's about. And I was having a whole conversation with my coach, Phil, who I'm sure lots of you know, Philomena, yesterday. And I was talking about the fear of embarrassing myself, and how I can post things on Twitter, but I can't post them on my personal Facebook. So that's a good thing, being able to embarrass yourself. I think that's a good superpower.
I think so, yeah.
I was once described as I only ever open my mouth to exchange feet.
I've not heard that one before, Steve. It's a novel one. Cool. Shall we move on to the final speaker, Mr. Adam Buss? If you don't know who Adam is, he's the CEO of Quad, where we usually are. Adam, do you want to take over the mic, introduce yourself, and do your thing, buddy?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. First, I kind of want to start by saying a massive thank you to Tim and to Future Proof and to all the Creative Mornings teams for doing this. So yeah, massive thank you. And then kind of the second thing I want to say is kind of a mea culpa. Always good to start a talk with some Latin. In that I said to Tim, Tim's been emailing me furiously over the last couple of weeks, asking for bio and pick and kind of my slides and what the hell I'm going to be talking about. And I've singularly failed to give him anything until about midnight last night. So it's been a bit of a crazy time. I'm not going to bother explaining that because we all know what's going on. So it's a challenging time for everyone. But I also thought, like, the easiest thing for me is to go third because I'm not a massive fan of mornings anyway. And I thought, like, giving myself enough time to kind of get into it. However, I've realised now, after Richard was very detailed, very clear, gave excellent examples and gave people takeaways, and then Carla was honest and emotional and clever and creative and fun, I've left myself a massive problem going third. So I'm kind of gonna try and do a bit of talk through my role, my roles in life, and kind of where my sense of purpose has come from, and hopefully there's some relevant things for all of you in that journey. And I'm going to kind of go right back to my earliest memory of when I started thinking about purpose. And I was thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, and I think I can pinpoint it to a very specific moment in infant school where I realised that I really loved sport, and the only thing you did at that point in time was sports day. So it was like an annual thing, sports day, egg and spoon race, all that kind of jazz. But I was never the quickest. I was never the one that could jump the furthest. I never had any specific skills. So I identified at one point, I don't know how, but I identified that the obstacle race was the one for me, because it was a bit of everything. And if you could duck and dive and you could practice and you could get involved, then there's the potential you could win that. So I used to do like set up little kind of versions of the obstacles in my garden. This is when I was like 6 or 7. Obviously not very professional, admittedly, not really a training schedule, and just try and like get through the hoop and like pick the thing up and do whatever it was. And I'm pleased to say at one point I did win the obstacle race. Now in my head, if anyone's ever watched like Rocky or anything like that, there's like a video montage that plays of me winning that obstacle race. The reality was there was like 3 people watching and no one cared. And all the parents were like just happy to get home after the end of it. But for me, that was a major thing. And it just started kind of awoke something in my head around thinking, okay, you need a vision, you need a kind of a horizon point to aim for, to get to, you need a purpose. So moving on through kind of school career, the next kind of memory I had, again, it's kind of sport related. So those of you who know me now know that, you know, if sport was my ultimate purpose in life, then pretty much I've spectacularly failed. But sport was always a big driver in terms of my life at the time. And I started playing a lot of football. And I was kind of okay. Like I wasn't brilliant, but I was okay. And I started winning those little plastic trophies that you get when you're a kid. If anyone's ever played sport, you get really bad plastic trophies with like a footballer doing some kind of unusual move that no one's ever seen on a real football pitch. And I thought, okay, yeah, no, like I'm good at this. Like, you know, you have the kind of weird fantasy dreams when you're a kid about being a spaceman or whatever it is. For me, it was being a footballer, even though reality was a million miles away. So for a brief time, my purpose was, okay, I'm going to get really good at this. I'm going to become an amazing footballer. Until, ironically, I played. I'm going to try and share my screen now. I started playing with a dude. Let me get that. Share. Oh, there's my notes. Oh, seen behind the curtain. Oh, there's my jokes. I was supposed to start one of those as well. Forgot that. All right, never mind. Anyway, can you see that? All see that? So I played with this guy, Gareth Barry, who's a footballer who played 653 Premier League appearances, blah, 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 blah. Played a couple of seasons with Gareth. You look over the side, he was born in Hastings, England. That's where I'm from. That's the only proof you're going to get. I've got one picture of us together. from whenever. And I realised after about a season that Gareth Barry, even at that time, 2 years younger than me, was about 1,000,000 times better, like ridiculously good, amazingly good at football, and went on to be signed and become a professional footballer. So that dream was dashed. But again, what it was doing in my head was it was reframing this continuum of what purpose was. Because I was sort of augmenting every time one of these challenges came along, I kind of changed what I thought my purpose was. But the reality was those purposes that I was looking at the time were kind of, you know, I'm not going to give my 6-year-old self too much of a hard time, but they were a bit vacuous. Wasn't a lot of detail around them, wasn't a lot of thought gone into it. Until I kind of got to secondary school, and I met a teacher, well, we met each other, who gave me a sense of purpose that really has stayed with me for the rest of my life. And that was around creativity. And hence why I'm here now, I guess, and why we're all here to a certain extent. She was my drama teacher. And I grew up in a place called Hastings, which if any of you have been there, 1066 Castle, by the sea, all that kind of stuff. When I was growing up, there was a particular article which again helped to reframe my purpose in a negative way at the time, but was part of kind of my journey. There was an article in the Daily Mail that described Hastings as hell on sea. And that was because at the time we had the highest teenage pregnancy and suicide rate in Europe outside of London and Manchester in the UK. And we had the highest rate of heroin usage in the country. Partly because there was an innovation, if you like, by the fishermen community in Hastings, whereby they would go out to the middle of the English Sea, meet up with trawlers from Holland mainly, pick up heroin and bring it in. So it was an entry point for heroin across the country. So you could look at it as a kind of a creative, innovative approach, if you like. But all of these things contributed to Hastings being seen in a very negative light, as well as the fact that the industry in Hastings, and this is a kind of a good model for anyone that looks at kind of town and city development, the industry in Hastings was very much based on tourism, which obviously died out very quickly in the kind of 60s, 70s, when package holidays started coming around. And what Hastings didn't do was it didn't have a secondary kind of fallback. It didn't have an option. And it's really only now, if you start going to Hastings now, you kind of see a bit more vibrancy. It's only in the last 5-10 years when actually local authorities gone, ding, do you know what? Creativity. That's a good way of changing the state of our town. So there's a new art gallery, there's a festival that started, there's a lot of creatives that have moved down from London, partially because it's cheaper than Brighton, to be perfectly honest, but you know, whatever works. And it's changing its face. So at that time, the reason I say that was there was a lot of negativity around the town, and there was a lot of negativity, particularly in kind of working class communities that I grew up in, where your horizon was very limited. Ironically, being by the sea, your horizon was very limited because there weren't really obvious job opportunities, and London was the only kind of nearest big place. Brighton was over there, but in terms of what that career trajectory would be, it was difficult to see. My mum was a hospital cleaner. Much love for all of those people that are doing that right now. I know how hard that job was when my mum was doing it, and I know how brilliant people do it. So yes, doctors, nurses, of course, but the porters, the cleaners, everyone that's keeping stuff moving, amazing work. And my dad was a postman, neither of whom kind of, and it's not a criticism of them at all, but neither of whom their horizons weren't massively far out either, because their experience was relatively limited. It was about having enough money to keep me, my brother and my sister to have food and clothes and go to school. That was their driver, and that was their kind of key purpose. So it was only until I met this drama teacher, this is completely rambling, I apologise, but this is, if anyone's ever heard me speak, this is my style, so yeah, it is what it is. My drama teacher, Mrs. Marchant, kind of took me aside at one point and said, look, you know, actually there are careers in the creative industries that you can do. You can become an actor, you can become a writer, you can work in the arts. And I was like, what, really? What, people pay you to do this stuff? I was like, yeah. So that was a really formative relationship for me. And it was my first experience as well, this is something I'll come back to at the end, of mentorship. Now, Mrs. Marchant didn't see it as mentorship at all, but for me, it was my first experience of what that can mean. And that means more than just a teacher or a coach. It means someone who you can talk about those kind of big existential questions that you might have, and question some of those things about the way that you do things at the time and how you might move on, in a safe space. And mentoring for me has been a hugely important thing, both from me mentoring other people, but also having mentors for myself has helped me to shape my purpose. So if we skip forward a few years, where else? Go back to my notes. Yeah, so do that. I also then decided that I wanted to kind of study this. I went to university in Derby, studied theatre and the arts. What university taught me, and apologies to anyone who works for University of Derby, but I think I've said this in various ways. What university taught me was less about the academics of film and theatre that I studied, and more about a sense of community and place. Because I found, Lucy works at University of Derby, so this is not criticism. I found people that became my lifelong friends at University of Derby, and also it taught me about the importance of those people at times of crisis and at times of challenge, and what it means to kind of have a community around you, but not only have a community around you, but what you can do to play a part in that community. So I got involved in the things that match my skill set, things like student radio, things like student newspaper, things where I knew I could contribute to, but would also help me develop the skills that I needed, and went from there. Skip forward a few years, I end up working in London for a experiential marketing agency. That feels so 90s when I say that. And I know they do kind of still exist, but you know, it is a bit 90s. I worked for an experiential marketing agency in London, and we worked with clients all over the world. That's where the bits on my CV that say Sony and Motorola and people like that. And there were two major campaigns that I remember. I was the head of media eventually for this company in London. And there were two campaigns that I worked on, which really helped to shape my sense of purpose. And I will share my screen again because I can find these online. There we go. No, not Gareth Barry. Yeah, this one. So this is a band called The Modern. Just going back, I was head of media at the time for the company that was doing PR for this band. What they did, and they're still, I think, in the Guinness Book of Records for this, their manager at the time bought an amazing amount of records that pushed them right up the UK charts. They went from basically being nowhere to being the first fraudulent band in the UK charts. Now, obviously, we weren't part of that, but I was trying to manage the media around that, which became increasingly difficult. But it taught me a lot of lessons. The other thing that I remember doing particularly was this. We set up a world record attempt for the most naked people on a roller coaster. So yeah, we got like 100 students, Thorpe Park. It was really cold. A lot of them really regretted it when they got there. It was mainly rugby teams, I'll be honest, from universities in and around London. But we got a lot of people, and it was the world record for about a week. And then Alton Towers did one that was bigger, and then various other people have done things that are bigger and better and whatever else. Now, the reason I mentioned those two things was both those two things at the time I really enjoyed, and I got a lot out of it. It was a lot of fun, clearly, you know, it was interesting stuff that was going on. But it also started to make me realise that what I was doing in that job, and this is not a criticism of the job at all, but it just didn't fit perfectly with me, was I was selling products for big brands. And I wasn't doing anything, going back to what Richard and Carla both said, I wasn't doing anything to think about that kind of core purpose that started to be embedded into me. And I was getting less and less creative, even though I was working in the creative industry. So I knew I wanted to work back in the arts. And that was my next step, to find a way of getting back and working in the arts. That is kind of everything I'd prepared to say, apart from I have got some vague takeaways that I'd like to share with you that might be vaguely useful or just completely annoying and irrelevant. But, you know, we'll see. Someone who I often go back to when I'm struggling to see what my purpose is, and I'll use a theatrical term here, super objectives. And in theatre terms, for those of you who don't know, in theatre terms, a super objective is when a character goes into a scene, and it can be an incredibly mundane scene, like a conversation about shopping or whatever else. But every character in that room knows what their super objective is. So it might be they want to fall in love with a person, or they want to murder someone, or they want to do whatever else. even if they're having a conversation about cucumbers, that super objective still sits there at the back of their heads and motivates everything they do in that scene. Now, for me, that's similar about purpose. I have a super objective, which is around that sense of where creativity and community combine and where it can change people's lives for the better. And as long as I've got that super objective in my mind, it enables me to do some of those more mundane things that I have to do on a daily basis. As I describe my job quite often, most of it is spreadsheets and meetings nowadays. Even now, ironically, nothing's changed. I'm still doing a lot of meetings, I'm still doing a lot of spreadsheets. So some things never change. So having a super objective for me is the key thing, because it helps me to lock in to why I'm doing what I'm doing at that particular moment, even if it's something that's frustrating or challenging or boring or whatever. I think both Carla and Richard talked about this, but for me, purpose is a continuum. It changes over time. You define it, you redefine it, you add to it, you amend it. And that's important to recognise. So don't get hung up. It's a bit like that thing about, you know, where you want to be when you're 40. If you've not made it there, don't worry if you're not quite sure what your purpose is now, because it will change anyway and amend, and you have to be ready to be flexible around that. Seek out where your purpose can impact on others, because that will help to shine a light on what it means to you. When you can see the reactions of people, whether that's a distant thing, a digital media thing, or it's an in-public thing, or it's a little comment, some of the things that have made the most difference to me have been really small comments that have been made by people in conversations that may seem inconsequential to them, but really reinforce what my purpose is. And it's important to seek out those conversations and those connections. Remind yourself of your place within your community. Now, community is something you need to define yourself as well. And we are a community right here now, but there's also various other ways that you can look at your community. Remind yourself of that. Be inspired by the purpose of those that inspire you. And I'll mention someone here for me who isn't necessarily a creative, but definitely sums up everything I like to try and aim towards. And it's a lady, hang on, oh God, doing things in the wrong order. Go back to that, share screen, there we go, there it is, share that. Is a lady called Claire Bertschinger, and let me find the link. Oh God, what am I doing? It's because the bar goes to the top of the page. Hang on, scroll it down, there we go. Claire Bertschinger. So hands up if anyone's heard of Claire Bertschinger before. No, that's the thing. And actually, I hadn't until a few years ago. I know some people know her, but she's an incredible person. She was the person, and this isn't necessarily a fun thing right now, so apologies, just a heads up for that. She was one of the people, frontline nurses, that was in the Ethiopia crisis prior to Live Aid and all the big global appeals. She was working for the Red Cross at the time, and it was her job, because there was no funding, because there was no money, because there was very limited resources. There was her and a very small team in the place that she was in. She was the triage nurse. Now, triage is where you decide who is the most sick and who needs the care quickest. It was her job on the front line at that time to make the decision, because they only had enough resource to treat around 100 people a day. She had to go down a line of people that needed treatment and mark off who out of those 100 people were the most at need. And she knew when she was doing that, the people that she didn't select would probably die. But she had to do it because that was the only resource they had. If you look back at the kind of interviews around that time, she did an interview with, I think it was Michael Burke from the ITV, where basically she said, no one is taking any notice of this, no one cares. There's no money, nothing is happening. It wasn't the kind of positive, more kind of creative stuff that followed that in terms of Live Aid and everything else. This was before all the famous people started getting involved. And she's credited as being one of the key people in drawing attention globally to the crisis that was going on in Ethiopia. She is very humble as well, and she will always say, you know, I was just part of that. But when you listen to her talk and the decisions she had to make on a daily basis, it really puts into perspective, you know, the challenges that people have, particularly at this point in time. So I quite often, in my dark moments, in the moments where I feel like I can't cope, where I can't get over things, where the challenge seems too insurmountable, I go back and I watch interviews with Claire Bertschinger. I listen to the way that she talks, and how she's adapted and how she's learned from the experiences she's had in incredibly difficult, challenging times. Oh yeah, okay, bringing the energy back up again, hopefully. So some quick things. Notebooks are really good. Have as many notebooks as you can. Write random notes. I've got notebooks going back 10 years. Yeah, exactly. With stuff that, it doesn't make any sense to me anymore, but sometimes I just open it, it makes me laugh because there's like unconnected words and I'm like, I have no idea what that means. But it's still interesting way of kind of sparking off ideas. Network, we all know about that. Listen to everyone. That's an important thing that I learned from Alan Bennett. There was an interview I saw with Alan Bennett, the playwright, and he talked about his creativity coming from listening to everyone. That means conversations on buses, conversations in cafes, random bits of dialogue you hear on the street. Things will spark your imagination in ways that you can't imagine if you just focus in and try and actively listen at times. There's a difference between hearing stuff and actively listening, where you're really zoning in on what people are saying. Try and do one thing a year that scares you. Now, for me, that's meant learning to ride a horse, trying to learn how to sail. Actually, I say learn. I've done these things. If someone put me on a horse now, I'd probably fall off. But I tried it at least. Do things that scare you, because that again helps to re-invoke that sense of purpose. Festivals are amazing. If there was like a magic trick that I could give people, go to a festival and watch stuff that you don't know anything about. Like go to a random folk festival, music festival, or Edinburgh festival, or a comedy festival, and don't go to the thing that you know about. Don't go to the people, the headlines, the people that you know are going to be fun. Go to something random. Some of the best creative experiences I've had in my life, when I've gone to a festival and not gone to any, I spent an entire day going to, like, a lot of it was rubbish, I warn you now, but there will be some nuggets in there. There'll be some amazing stuff that you will never have thought about, and it will invoke other ideas. And then the final thing I want to leave with, and this is kind of a thing for our times now, is just that thing. And I know we all do it, and I agree with Carla and what Richard said. Your intention is just, you want to drive on, you want to do as many things as possible. We're all creative, and that's how our brains work. But you have to also apply that kind of, that idea and that thought about purpose to your personal life, because it will affect you at some point. You need your friends, you need to support them, you need your family around you, and use those skills you've got to bring them closer to you and to reaffirm that sense of purpose. That's it. I'll pause. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Adam. There's so much good stuff in there, like augmenting, like your purpose changes as it goes along. I'm sure I went through my 20s and 30s with a different purpose every 2.5 days, if I'm honest. But horizon, I like the concept of people having horizons and creative horizons, and how it's down to us to rewrite that narrative. And a big shout out for mentors. I love I've got 2 or 3 good mentors that have been with me for ages. One of them is Sharon Roberts, who usually comes to our little in-person things, who's unfortunately in the hospital currently with coronavirus, so fingers crossed for her. And super objectives are a great concept. Love that. So I noticed Richard Hyde has got his hand up icon. Was that from this time?
That was from previous. That's fine.
Have you got anything for Adam? Anybody got anything for Adam before we round up? Awesome. One big round of applause for Adam then, please, people. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Adam. Brilliant.
It was really great for everybody to join us, and we'll be back with Jenny Lothrop, probably on Zoom for May, who's speaking next month. I won't tell you the no spoilers on the title, because that will ruin my email for the first of the month. But Jenny will be back and doing something very special for us. But thanks very much, people. Go back day. Have a lovely day. Happy Fridays. Keep safe, and I'll see you next time.
See you soon. See you, everyone.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.